Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the KOBKALCast from my freezing cold office in Bangor, Maine. Air conditioning, man. Why is it that we cool things down to colder than we would heat them in the wintertime? I don't understand that. I'm literally wearing wool slippers right now. So this week we're going to talk about the Woodman Cardigan from Knitting Outside the Box. It's one of the patterns from the very, very final chapter of the book, which is Go For It. It is basically how to take all of these concepts and ideas that we've put together in the first sections of the book and actually make a thing. So in that chapter, I walk you through what it looked like for me to design each of the three pieces in it and what kind of that meant for the bigger picture. So for this one, and I'll show you some pretty pictures, but this one plays a lot with welts. I absolutely love welts. I think they're so much fun to do, and you feel like a wizard when you do them. But the other really cool thing that they do is, as per one of the chapters in my book, they are a stitch pattern that dramatically changes your gauge. So what they do is when you do a welt, so this is, I'm holding it perpendicular from how it's normally knit, so you would knit it this way. When you do a welt, you are compressing your row gauge. Okay, so you can see here, this section and this section are the same rows, but it's shorter along here than it is along here. That's because the welts here compress the fabric. So think of it like a reverse short row almost. You're taking away height in some areas rather than adding height to it. Super fun to play with. Welts are something that I keep coming back to in my designs, and I will probably do so forever. I love them. They're so cool. They're such a fun way to manipulate your fabric. But they're a little bit weird to work. So what I wanted to do today was give you a little bit of a demo on how to make that happen so that when you get ready to knit your Woodman, this one is so soft and squishy. It's so soft. You can do so with aplomb and power and strength and glory. Sure, all of those things. All right, here we go.
Okay, so welts typically happen on stockinette fabrics. That's what we're going to do here. And what I've done is I've worked probably about 10 rows in my fabric. I'm working obviously on larger needles and larger yarn than I did with Woodman, but that's so you can see things when we're first starting out. So what you're going to need is a spare DPN in a smaller size. That's going to be really helpful. There are two ways to do welts. This one, you pick everything up in one go, which I find a lot easier. So I'll demonstrate what the other one looks like, but it's not my favorite. So for Woodman, the welts on this are 4 rows deep, and they can be any depth. That is totally up to you when you're working with welts. With Woodman, I like that 4-row shape. It looked really good on that sport weight fabric, so that's what I wanted to work with. But what we'll do is you count down 4 rows from below your needle. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and what I'll do is I'm going to take my DPN and I'm going to insert into the head of that stitch on row 4. So let me count again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Going to insert, and I'm going to start in the middle of my fabric. It can be really hard to start on the edge of your fabric. It's hard with selvage stitches to know what's what. So often I start in the middle of my fabric, and because it's a DPN, I can work all the way that way, finish, and then come back and pick up that way. So I'm going to pick up the next one over, and then the next one over, and the next one over. Right now, I'm not worried too much about orientation. I'm just getting them on the needles. Next one over, and at the same time, you want to make sure you're not losing anything off the tip here. So keep checking. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to make sure I'm in the right spot. It is possible to jump around, and that's actually fun sometimes. You can do that. You can go down 2 on one, down 6 on another, down 2 on one, down 6 on the other, and it'll make this like wave in your fabric. Really fun to play with. All right, let's see. So we're going to keep going across. 4, I'm going to double check. 1, 2, 3. Spread that out so you can really see it. 1, 2, 3, 4. That guy right there. The reason that I'm going into the head of the stitch here is so that we maintain the exact same stitch count as we have on the needles. Okay, so when we go into the head of the stitch, we are looking at the same part of the stitch as is currently on our needles. If we were to go anywhere else, like if we were to go into the tail here, see that's kind of like the downstroke right there. In my technical terms, when I'm talking about this in classes, I will often refer to these as frownies, and smileys, yay! Frownies, smileys, yay! I've lost my mind, it's fine. So what that means is that the frownies are the top of the stitch and the smileys are the running thread between two stitches, which is fine. Both of those are equally legitimate. But if we pick up the smiley, that running thread between the stitches, what that'll do is it'll be the same thing as we'd get with a provisional cast on. Okay, that would mean we are working from between the stitches, and what that does is that's going to change our stitch count. We're either going to have one more or one fewer what's on the needles, depending on if you're working flat in the round, depending on what your knitting looks like, all of those. So when we pick up the head of the stitch, we're ensuring that we're getting the exact same stitch count. Okay, so the last one, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I can come back over, slide my needle tip over a little bit, and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 4. And I'm going to double check that I have the same amount here as I have on the needle. So on the needle I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And on my DPN, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yay! Okay, so that is step 1. We now have that picked up. The reason we use the smaller DPN, if I haven't already said this, is because that makes it easier to thread through there. You've got some wiggle room for picking that up. Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2 is we're going to do essentially, I'll bring my yarn over here, we're going to do essentially a 3 needle bind off-ish with this. We're going to join the stitches on this needle with the stitches on this needle, and when we do that, it will fold the fabric between them and create that pleat, create that welt in our fabric. How cool is that? So, so cool. So, get everything lined up properly. And here's where you want to start to check the orientation of your stitches. I'm oriented the way that I need to be for typical Western knitting. If you end up picking up the stitches in the other direction, totally fine. You can just reorient them before you go, or you can knit them through the back loop when you do this part. Or you can just knit them, because if they're twisted, no one's gonna see it. It's on the back side, it's fine, it's fine. Okay, so with our working yarn and making sure that our working needle is in front, I'm going to insert through the first stitch on the needle, which is on my front needle, which is on my big needle, and then through the first stitch on the back needle. So that's one that I just picked up. I'm going to knit them together and take it off. I'm going to keep going and do that same thing. So I'm going to go in through the front needle, in through the back needle, knit together, and off. And we're going to do that all the way across the row. In through the front, in through the back, knit and off, in through the front, in through the back, knit and off. All right, last one. In through the front, in through the back. Get them together and off. So we're done with our DPN. We can put that away for now. Because when you look at it, check that out. You have created a welt in your fabric. You have created this amazing, let me turn it so you can see. Look at that. Look how cool that 3D aspect is. And when you look at the back, it just looks like a row of knit two togethers or purl two togethers. Like you don't really see anything in the back. It's like this stealth coolness going on. One other thing you can do, or one other way you can do it, sorry, I just moved my camera here. One other way you can do it is to pick up each stitch individually as you go. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm not going to go all the way across, and I'm also doing this on a purl row, so not ideal in any situation. But what you can do is you can go down 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, where are you? Why are you off? There we go, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pick that up and knit it together. And then I can come here and go 1, 2, 3, 4. Pick that up, knit it together. 1, 2, 3, 4, pick that up. What I find though is that once you get started and your fabric starts pushing in on itself, it's hard to actually get an accurate count of where you're going. So I think it's much easier to put everything in at once, fold it together, and go from there. So that is how you do the welts in Woodman. I hope you enjoyed that little glimpse on how to make welts happen in Woodman. Woodman is knit up in Mrs. Crosby knits in the yarn Hat Box and the colorway Roasted Chestnuts. This really, really beautiful, sumptuous mid-brown color. Absolutely gorgeous, and that yarn is divine. It's wool, silk, and cashmere. Drapey, drapey, drapey beautifulness. One reason I wanted to use welts in this though is because superwash wool, superwash merino is part of that, silk and cashmere. Both silk and cashmere have a lot of drape to them, which is fantastic, but it means that sometimes we need to add a little bit of extra stability to it in order to make sure that it doesn't like sag out around you. So having those welts in there creates a little bit of rigidity in your fabric and kind of shores up what's going on with that structure. So Woodman is named after the American photographer Francesca Woodman, who's my friend Leah's favorite artist. So a little shout out to my friend Leah there. Yeah, so I think that's it for Woodman. Thank you again for joining me, and we will see you next time. Bye, guys.